The sun shone brightly over the neighborhood pool that summer afternoon. The water sparkled like tiny diamonds as children laughed and splashed around. The smell of sunscreen mixed with the faint scent of chlorine hung in the air, warm and heavy. Families lounged on chairs, some reading, others chatting in small groups. The sounds of joyful shouts and water splashes filled the space, creating a lively, carefree atmosphere. On the surface, everything seemed normal, happy even. But underneath, tensions were quietly simmering. She walked up to the pool gate, her towel draped over her shoulder, a small backpack slung casually across her back. She was quiet, her steps careful, as if she wanted to fade into the background. The girl looked around at the busy pool, scanning the water for a spot that felt safe away from the chaos. She had learned long ago that being noticed often led to unwanted attention. Her eyes briefly met those of other kids playing in groups, and she nodded politely to a familiar face, someone she had grown comfortable with over the last few years. But her gaze quickly shifted again, avoiding any lingering stares. She had always been careful even when it came to fun. She loved swimming, loved the cool embrace of the water on a hot day, but she had also learned to keep a watchful eye on the people around her. The neighborhood wasn't always kind. There were kids who were cruel, who took pleasure in pointing out differences and making others feel smaller just to lift themselves up. She had encountered their jeers before, but she had never let them truly bother her. Not yet. She knew how to stay calm, how to navigate through the small battles of everyday life without losing herself. Still, today felt different. As she stepped closer to the water, she sensed eyes on her. Not just the casual glances of children seeing someone new, but the sharp, calculating looks of those who had made it their mission to intimidate anyone who didn't fit their idea of normal. They were already there, lounging near the shallow end, their laughter carrying an edge that wasn't friendly. She could feel it in her chest, a subtle tightening that she recognized immediately. It wasn't fear exactly, it was alertness, the instinctive awareness that danger was nearby, even if it wasn't yet obvious. The bullies were a small group. Only a few kids, but their presence was enough to make others step back. They had been targeting her for weeks now, sneers and whispered insults, pushing and shoving when no adults were around. It had started with small things, mocking her hairstyle, calling her names behind her back. Then it escalated, snide comments about the way she moved, the way she spoke, her quiet nature. They had found joy in making her feel out of place, and though she had tried to ignore it, there was a weight that grew heavier every day. She adjusted the strap of her backpack and took a slow breath. Swimming had always been her escape. In the water, she could forget everything, feel free, the movements of her body slicing through the pool, the rhythm of her breathing. It all gave her a sense of control she rarely experienced on land. But stepping closer to the edge of the pool, she knew she had to be careful. The bullies had noticed her approach, and the sharp glint of amusement in their eyes told her that they were planning something. Her focus sharpened. She remembered the lessons from her martial arts training, the years she had spent learning to control her body, to move with precision, to stay calm under pressure. No one at school, no one in her neighborhood knew about it. She kept it hidden, a secret part of herself that gave her strength without attracting attention. Today, she reminded herself, she might not need to reveal it, yet. She just needed to survive the afternoon without falling into their trap. She found a spot near the edge of the pool where the water wasn't too crowded. Carefully, she placed her towel on the poolside bench and slipped into the water. The cool embrace of the pool was instant relief. She took a few strokes, letting the water carry her forward, feeling her muscles respond, her body moving naturally. Confidently, for a moment, she could forget about the bullies, forget about the weight of their eyes, and simply enjoy the rhythm of swimming. But it wasn't long before the bullies made their presence known. One of them, a boy with a sharp, mocking grin, splashed water in her direction. She ducked instinctively, water dripping down her hair, and kept moving. He laughed loudly, the sound echoing across the pool. "Hey, look who thinks she can swim," he called out. "Bet she can't even keep up." The others snickered, their eyes tracking her every movement, waiting for the moment she faltered. She ignored them, keeping her focus on the water, on the small circle she had carved out for herself. But she could feel their energy pressing in, trying to provoke a reaction. The tension was palpable, an invisible current running beneath the surface. She knew they wanted a reaction, a sign of fear or frustration, something they could tease her with. She forced herself to stay calm, to let the water absorb the anger and tension, to turn it into clarity instead of letting it consume her. Minutes passed. The bullies circled the shallow end, throwing taunts, splashing water near her, trying to draw her into confrontation. She kept her distance, floating and moving with grace, refusing to rise to their bait. Yet every now and then, she caught herself glancing at them, measuring their intentions, calculating the right moment to retreat or defend herself if needed. Her martial arts training taught her awareness, and in this moment it was her greatest tool. Despite their aggression, she noticed small details about them that gave her confidence. One of the boys moved with too much swagger, overestimating his strength. Another girl was quick to laugh at others' mistakes, but hesitant when challenged directly. Even in the midst of tension, she could see their weaknesses, the cracks in their facade of dominance. It was a quiet reminder that strength wasn't always about loud threats or sharp words. It was about knowing yourself and staying grounded. The pool began to feel like a stage, each movement under scrutiny, each glance carrying meaning. She wasn't just swimming. She was navigating an invisible battlefield, a game of perception and control. Around her, other children continued to play, oblivious to the brewing tension. Parents chatted on the benches, occasionally glancing at the water but not fully seeing the silent struggle unfolding near the shallow end. It was as if the world was moving normally while she held her breath, suspended in a moment of anticipation. She had always known that one day she might face real confrontation, not the teasing and bullying she had managed to avoid for years. Today, she realized, was that day. The bullies were testing her limits, seeing how far they could push her, eager to break the calm exterior she maintained. And she, in turn, was testing herself, seeing how far she could stay composed, how well she could read the situation, how ready she truly was to defend herself if needed. The afternoon sun began to dip slightly, casting long shadows across the pool area. The water reflected the golden light, creating patterns that danced across her arms and shoulders as she moved. It was beautiful, peaceful, deceptive, the calm before the storm. She knew instinctively that the next few moments would be critical. She felt her heart rate increase slightly, not out of fear but alertness. Every muscle, every thought, every breath was in alignment. She was ready, even if no one else suspected it. The bullies' laughter grew louder, sharper. One of them reached out, splashing water directly at her face. She sputtered, water entering her nose and mouth, and instinctively pushed back with a quick stroke. Their laughter turned to shouts of surprise as she moved with unexpected speed, her arms cutting through the water efficiently, her body agile and controlled. For a brief moment, a ripple of doubt passed through the group, though they masked it quickly with sneers. She surfaced, gasping lightly for air, eyes fixed on the boy who had splashed her. His grin faltered slightly, and she noticed a flicker of uncertainty. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The clarity in her eyes, the quiet confidence in her stance, spoke volumes more than words could. She wasn't just another quiet girl at the pool. She was someone who had prepared for challenges in ways no one could see. As the tension continued to build, she realized that the pool was no longer just a place for fun. It was a test, a moment that would reveal strength, not only physical but mental and emotional. The bullies were pushing, but she had control. She was aware of their moves, their intentions, their weaknesses. And though the day had started with the simple desire to swim and enjoy the water, it was now a proving ground for something far more important: her resilience, her composure, her hidden power. The sun continued its slow descent, the light warming the surface of the water and casting long reflections that shimmered like silver. She moved through the pool with purpose, not arrogance, not anger, but with a quiet determination that made every motion deliberate. The bullies had underestimated her, as they always did, and though the afternoon was far from over, she felt a calm certainty settle within her. She was ready for whatever came next. In that moment, as the water clung to her skin and the laughter of children echoed around her, she understood something vital. Being underestimated was a strength. It gave her the element of surprise, the power of unseen skill. And though the bullies had chosen her as their target, they had no idea the force they were about to awaken. The calm before the storm had never felt so alive, so charged, so full of quiet promise. The quiet tension from earlier began to shift as the bullies grew bolder. They circled closer, moving with a confidence that came from knowing they had dominated the playground and pool before. The girl could feel their energy pressing against her, each glance like a small weight on her shoulders. She tried to ignore them at first, focusing on the water and the rhythm of her strokes. But the air around her was thick with their presence. They were planning something and she knew it. One of the boys, the one who had splashed her before, nudged another and pointed toward her with a mocking grin. They began to whisper to each other, their heads close together, their laughter quiet but sharp. It wasn't long before they started calling out, their voices carrying across the pool. "Hey, watch out! Don't fall in too far," one shouted. The girl ignored them, keeping her movements smooth and deliberate. She didn't want to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. But the bullies weren't going to stop. They moved closer to the edge of the shallow end where she was swimming, edging into the water themselves. Their footsteps splashed loudly, drawing attention. Some of the other kids noticed, exchanging confused looks, while a few parents glanced up, uncertain of what was happening. The girl could sense the danger building. She had faced teasing before, but this was different. The way they circled, the way they watched her, it was clear that they intended more than just words. Suddenly, one of them lunged forward and splashed water directly at her face. She sputtered, caught off guard by the sudden force, and instinctively twisted her body to avoid further splashes. The water stung her eyes and made it hard to breathe, but she stayed calm. She surfaced quickly, her gaze fixed on the boy, her chest rising and falling as she steadied herself. There was a flash of anger in his eyes, but it was mixed with surprise. He had expected her to be afraid, to flinch or retreat, but she didn't. "You think you can just swim here alone?" he sneered, stepping closer into the pool, his feet hitting the bottom with firm stomps. "This is our spot. You don't belong here." The girl felt a cold weight in her stomach. These weren't just kids joking around. They meant to intimidate her, to prove they were in charge. But beneath the weight, she felt a surge of determination. She wasn't going to let them control her, not here, not today. One of the girls in the group laughed, a high, cruel sound. "Yeah, you better watch yourself. You don't even know how to handle us," she said, flicking water toward her. The girl dodged the splash, twisting her body with practiced ease. The movement felt natural, almost second nature, and for a brief moment she allowed herself a small private smile. They had no idea that she wasn't as powerless as they thought. The boy who had initially splashed her took a step further, reaching out to grab her arm. She dodged instinctively, moving backward through the water. The pool suddenly felt smaller. The water around her churned with the bullies' movements, and the crowd of onlookers was unaware of the silent struggle unfolding. It wasn't a fight yet, but the tension was rising. She could sense that the moment of confrontation was near, and she readied herself mentally for whatever came next. Then, in an instant, the situation escalated. One of the boys shoved her with more force than before, aiming to knock her off balance. She stumbled in the water, splashing, gasping, and for a moment it seemed as though she might struggle. The other bullies laughed loudly, their voices carrying over the pool. "You can't even keep yourself afloat," one shouted, leaning over the edge, enjoying the spectacle of what they thought would be humiliation. The girl's heart raced, but she didn't panic. She felt the water around her, her arms moving with precision, her legs finding balance. The push had been strong, but she regained her stability quickly. Her movements were deliberate, controlled, and she could see the shock flicker across the bullies' faces. They had expected her to flounder, to panic, to show fear, but she didn't. She was alert, aware, ready for what was coming next. But the bullies weren't satisfied with mere shoves. One of the boys, frustrated by her calm reaction, made a sudden move. He reached from behind and tried to drag her into the deeper end of the pool, thinking that the water would overwhelm her. The other bullies cheered him on, laughing and egging him forward. The girl felt the sudden pull, her body shifting, the water rising around her. For a brief second, panic tried to creep in, but she pushed it down. Relying on her training, her awareness, her hidden skills, she twisted sharply, using the momentum against him, and managed to break free. Her movements were quick, almost fluid, each motion purposeful. The boy stumbled, nearly losing his balance in the water, and the other bullies stared in disbelief. They had never seen her move like this. They had never imagined that beneath her quiet exterior was someone who could react with such control and skill. The girl swam a short distance toward the edge of the pool, keeping a steady eye on the bullies. She knew they wouldn't stop, that they were testing her, pushing her to see if she could be humiliated. But now she was no longer just defending herself, she was asserting her presence. Every stroke, every movement sent a clear message. She wasn't going to be an easy target. Some of the younger kids nearby began to notice the struggle, pointing and whispering to each other. A few parents started to pay attention, their faces showing concern as they saw the tension escalating. The girl ignored the murmurs around her, focusing entirely on the bullies. She could see their frustration building, their confidence faltering as they realized she wasn't as vulnerable as they had assumed. The boy who had tried to drag her into the deep end lunged again, more aggressively this time. The girl reacted instantly, her training kicking in. She twisted her body, using a movement she had practiced countless times in martial arts classes. The boy lost his balance, flailing in the water, and for the first time the other bullies showed real hesitation. Their laughter faded, replaced by uneasy glances. They were facing someone who could respond in ways they hadn't prepared for. She took a moment to catch her breath, floating in the water, her eyes locked on the group. They were trying to intimidate her, to provoke a reaction, but she refused. Every movement she made now was calculated, precise, controlled. She wasn't just defending herself physically, she was maintaining her composure, her confidence, her sense of self. And that she knew was more powerful than any shove or insult they could throw at her. The tension reached its peak when one of the bullies, in a desperate attempt to assert control, splashed water directly into her face again. She ducked under, letting the water flow over her, and resurfaced with a sharp, deliberate stroke that carried her forward. The splash sent the boy stumbling backward, and the other bullies looked at each other, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. They had never encountered someone who could handle them with such poise, who could take their aggression and redirect it so effortlessly. For a few moments, there was a strange pause. The bullies stared, their confidence shaken, while she floated, breathing steadily, aware of every movement in the water and around her. She realized that this moment was a turning point. They had tried to humiliate her, to show dominance, but she had remained in control. The fear they had intended to create had not taken hold. Instead, they were the ones unsure, the ones struggling to maintain their facade of power. The girl knew she had to be careful. The bullies could still escalate, and she couldn't underestimate their persistence. But she also understood something important. She had the ability to protect herself. Her training, her focus, her calm in the water had given her an advantage that no one at the pool had seen before. And as the afternoon sun reflected off the rippling water, she felt a quiet confidence growing within her. The bullies, realizing that their plan had failed, began to regroup. Their laughter faded into low mutters, their movements less assured. The girl swam slowly toward the edge, her eyes never leaving them, every stroke deliberate. She didn't attack. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough to make them hesitate, to reconsider their actions. She was no longer just the quiet girl at the pool. She was someone who could stand her ground, someone who refused to be intimidated. By the time she reached the shallow end, she was calm, her breathing steady, her mind alert. The bullies exchanged glances, frustration and disbelief in their eyes. They had expected an easy target, someone they could push and laugh at. Instead, they had found a girl who was aware, capable, and unshakable. The quiet strength she had carried all these years had revealed itself not with anger, but with precision and calm. Even as the tension slowly began to ease, she remained aware. The bullies might still try something, but she knew she was ready. The water, the sun, the sounds of the pool, all of it seemed charged now with a errant energy. She had survived their first real test, and she had done so with skill and composure. And as she floated there, letting the water support her, she realized that this was just the beginning of something larger, a moment that would define her strength in ways she was only beginning to understand. The moment hung in the air like a held breath, the kind that made everything feel sharper, more alive. The bullies stared at her, their confidence faltering, their previous laughter replaced by a mix of disbelief and tension. They had come to the pool thinking they could dominate, humiliate, and control. But now, standing, or rather floating in the water, she had shifted the balance entirely. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The calm intensity in her eyes said everything they needed to know. She was not someone to underestimate. One of the boys, frustrated and desperate to regain his authority, moved toward her again. He lunged, trying to grab her arm, thinking sheer aggression would work. She reacted instantly, twisting her body in a fluid motion that sent him stumbling off balance, splashing water wildly. The other bullies gasped. Their smirks faltered, their body language betraying their fear. They had never seen her move like that. She wasn't just swimming. She was dancing with the water, using every stroke and twist with purpose and precision. Her movements were no longer defensive. They were deliberate, controlled, and assertive. She could feel the strength in her own body, the power that had been honed through years of martial arts practice, quiet lessons learned behind closed doors, away from the world's judgment. Every motion was calculated. Every action sent a silent message she was in command. The water around her became both shield and weapon, carrying her energy, reflecting her resolve. One of the girls in the group tried to step forward, hoping that by working together they could overwhelm her. But the girl anticipated it. With a sharp instinctive pivot, she moved in a way that caused the girl to slip slightly, flailing for balance in the shallow end. It was subtle, not cruel, enough to assert control, enough to make the bullies realize that she wasn't simply going to endure their torment. Shock passed across their faces. Their carefully constructed facade of superiority was cracking under the weight of her skill and calm confidence. She felt a surge of clarity. For years she had hidden her abilities, not wanting attention or praise, not wanting anyone to know that beneath her quiet exterior was someone formidable. And now, in this unassuming place, she realized the truth of her own power. It wasn't about dominating others for the sake of pride. It was about protecting herself, asserting her boundaries, and reclaiming the control they had tried to steal from her. Every flick of her wrist, every twist of her torso, every deliberate movement in the water reinforced that truth. The bullies tried to regroup, their gestures sharper, their voices louder, but uncertainty had replaced confidence. One of the boys made a reckless move, splashing water toward her face in an attempt to startle her. She ducked instinctively, then surged forward with precision. Her movements were almost artistic, flowing yet strong, and the boy found himself unbalanced, sputtering in the water. The others hesitated. They had expected compliance, weakness, fear, and they were met with neither. Some of the younger children around the pool began to notice. Whispers spread, curiosity mixed with awe. A few parents had started paying attention, concern etched on their faces as they tried to understand what was happening. She didn't break her focus. She didn't glance at the spectators. Her eyes remained locked on the bullies, her body ready for whatever came next. She understood that this moment was larger than the pool or the teasing. It was about showing that she could defend herself, that she could respond to injustice with skill and composure. The boy who had initially tried to drag her into the deep end lunged again, his frustration evident in every movement. But she was ready. With a swift, calculated motion, she sidestepped, letting his momentum carry him forward harmlessly into the water. He flailed, surprised by the ease with which she had neutralized his attack. The other bullies hesitated, glancing at one another, their earlier confidence dissolving into uncertainty. They had underestimated her, and that mistake was now painfully clear. She remained calm even as her pulse quickened. She didn't lash out in anger. She didn't need to. Each movement she made was intentional, defensive yet powerful, teaching the bullies a lesson without cruelty. She could see the shift in their demeanor. They had expected to terrify her, to break her spirit, and instead, their own certainty was unraveling. This was the power of skill combined with self-control, and it was a lesson they weren't prepared for. As she floated in the water, a thought passed through her mind. This was the moment her training had prepared her for. The countless hours of practice, the quiet discipline, the lessons in control, focus, and balance. It had all led to this instant. She realized that her power didn't come from aggression or anger. It came from understanding herself, trusting her instincts, and remaining calm when others tried to provoke chaos. The water was her ally, and she moved through it with confidence and purpose. One of the bullies, trying to recover some sense of authority, splashed again, more violently this time. She twisted her body with a quick, precise motion, redirecting the force of the water, and the boy stumbled, nearly losing his balance. The others froze, their previous bravado replaced by hesitation. They had never faced anyone who could counter their actions so effortlessly, someone who could turn their aggression back on them without even trying to hurt them. It was a lesson in humility, and they were learning it too late. The girl's heart remained steady. She felt a calm satisfaction, not from revenge, but from recognition of her own strength. She had been underestimated for too long, dismissed because of her quiet demeanor, her reserved nature. But now, in the midst of this chaotic situation, She had revealed her capabilities. She was no longer just the quiet girl who went unnoticed. She was someone who could stand firm, someone who commanded respect without speaking a word. She noticed the subtle shifts in their body language. Hesitation replaced bravado. Glances replaced sneers, and the group's cohesion began to unravel. They had underestimated not only her skill, but also her mental fortitude. They had thought they could intimidate her, that they could provoke fear, but instead, they faced someone who was fully aware, fully capable, and fully in control. As she floated and moved through the water with measured grace, a few parents had stepped closer, their eyes wide as they finally comprehended the intensity of the situation. Some older kids around the pool watched, whispers spreading as the scene unfolded. They saw a quiet girl, seemingly ordinary, handle aggression with skill and calmness that none of them had expected. It was a lesson in strength, in presence, in the quiet power that comes from discipline and self-belief. The boy who had lunged first tried again, desperate to regain some semblance of control. This time she anticipated his movement even before he acted. With a fluid turn and a quick push against the water, she redirected him harmlessly, causing him to stumble into the shallow end. The other bullies froze, their coordinated efforts failing. The girl's mastery of movement, her ability to remain calm under pressure, had turned the situation completely in her favor. A strange silence settled over the pool for a moment, broken only by the gentle lapping of water and the distant laughter of children unaware of the struggle that had just transpired. The bullies looked at each other, their previous confidence shattered. They had thought control was theirs, that intimidation would bend her will, but they were wrong. Completely wrong. The girl allowed herself a brief moment of relief, floating in the water, her body relaxed but alert. She had shown them her strength, not with aggression, not with anger, but with calm precision and skill. She understood something fundamental in that moment. Real power wasn't about bullying others or showing off. It was about knowing yourself, trusting your abilities, and standing firm even when others try to shake you. The bullies, now hesitant and unsure, backed away slowly. Their plan had failed spectacularly. The quiet girl they had intended to humiliate had turned the tables entirely, leaving them exposed, confused, and humbled. For the first time, they were confronted with someone who would not be swayed by fear, someone who commanded respect through presence and skill rather than loud threats. She swam toward the edge of the pool, moving steadily, deliberately, her gaze never leaving the group. They remained at a distance, uncertain, watching her every movement. She didn't mock them, didn't gloat. She simply asserted her boundaries, a silent declaration that she would not be intimidated, and that she was in control of her own space. As she reached the poolside and pulled herself out, water dripping from her hair and clothes, she felt a quiet triumph. It wasn't about defeating them in a fight or proving dominance. It was about standing firm, maintaining control, and showing that she could respond with strength and composure even in the most challenging situations. She had reclaimed her space, and in doing so, had claimed a deeper understanding of her own resilience. The bullies remained in the water, their expressions a mixture of shock and frustration. They had underestimated her, assumed weakness where there was none, and now faced the consequences of that misjudgment. For the girl, it was a lesson reinforced. She was capable, prepared, and strong in ways that were invisible to most. And while the afternoon sun continued to shine, warming the water and reflecting off the surface, she knew that this moment was a turning point, not just in the day, but in her understanding of herself and her own power. She walked toward her towel and bag, her steps steady, her head held high. She didn't need to look back at the bullies. They had learned what they needed to learn, and she had proven to herself what she was capable of. The quiet girl at the pool had revealed a strength that was both physical and mental, a hidden skill that had surfaced at precisely the right moment. And as she wrapped her towel around her shoulders, she felt a sense of calm and certainty she had never felt before. She could face challenges, protect herself, and rise above fear, all while remaining true to who she was. The tension that had gripped the pool slowly began to ease, but the air was still heavy with shock. The bullies had retreated, their previous confidence replaced with hesitation and quiet murmurs. They stayed close together, whispering among themselves, casting glances toward the girl who had just shown them that she could not be intimidated. Even though the physical struggle had ended, the weight of what had happened hung in the air like an unspoken question. What would happen next? Parents and bystanders had finally begun to fully take notice. Some had rushed forward during the peak of the confrontation, fear written clearly on their faces, only to find that the girl had handled herself remarkably. They whispered to each other, their eyes wide, pointing out the movements and control she had displayed. There were murmurs of disbelief. How could someone so quiet, so unassuming, demonstrate such skill and calm in a tense situation? It was clear to everyone watching that she had not only defended herself, but had done so with precision and maturity far beyond her years. The bullies, sensing the shifting attention, tried to regain some control, but their attempts were weak, almost pathetic. The boy who had initially pushed her stepped back, rubbing his arm where he had stumbled. He avoided eye contact with her, clearly shaken by the unexpected turn of events. The others mirrored his actions, their earlier bravado extinguished. The subtle fear in their movements made it clear that their dominance had crumbled, replaced by an uncertain understanding that they had misjudged her entirely. The girl, meanwhile, stayed calm. She didn't gloat or mock them. She simply collected her belongings from the poolside, drying herself with her towel, keeping her movements deliberate and composed. Her body, still dripping with water, carried an air of quiet confidence. Every observer could see that she was in control, and that control extended far beyond the physical confrontation. It was mental, emotional, and deeply rooted in the knowledge of her own capabilities. One of the parents, finally stepping forward, addressed the group of bullies in a firm but calm tone. "Is this really how you want to behave? Do you think pushing someone and trying to intimidate them is acceptable?" The bullies shuffled, murmuring excuses, clearly aware that the presence of adults had shifted the power dynamic. Their words felt hollow against the weight of the girl's demonstration of skill and composure. No one could argue with what they had witnessed. The girl walked over to the edge of the pool, her wet hair clinging to her shoulders, and met the eyes of the bullies. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her steady gaze alone conveyed everything. She was unharmed, unafraid, and fully capable of standing her ground. There was no malice in her expression, only calm authority. That simple presence was enough to humble them further. They began to realize that their actions had consequences far beyond the immediate moment, that their assumptions about her had been wrong in every way. The atmosphere around the pool began to shift as the crowd processed the events. Conversations started, initially whispers, then more confident discussions. "Did you see how she moved?" one parent asked another. "I've never seen anyone so calm in a tense situation." "It's incredible," someone else replied. "She didn't just defend herself, she showed complete control." "That takes skill and focus," the words spread, and even children who had been playing nearby paused, their eyes wide as they took in the unfolding scene. Meanwhile, the bullies were now facing a social reckoning. Their peers, who had previously avoided confronting them, began to distance themselves. Some younger children who had admired their confidence now watched with awe, seeing a new standard of strength, one that was quiet, disciplined, and unassuming, yet undeniably powerful. The social hierarchy at the pool had shifted, and the bullies were no longer at the top. Their actions had been exposed, and the respect they had relied on was gone. The girl's parents, who had arrived just as the confrontation ended, rushed over. They were both concerned and proud, emotions mixing in a way that made her feel seen and understood. They didn't scold her for the situation, knowing she had handled it with remarkable composure. Instead, they expressed quiet relief, gratitude for her safety, and admiration for the strength she had shown. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezing it gently while her mother nodded, eyes wide with pride. They had always known she was capable, but witnessing it firsthand was something entirely different. Authorities were not required at the pool, but the adult supervision made the bullies realize the full scope of their actions. They had not just misjudged her abilities, they had acted recklessly in a public space. Their parents were likely to hear about the incident, and the social consequences were already apparent. The girl herself remained composed, aware that she didn't need to add commentary or threats. Her actions had already communicated the lesson. Respect was earned through skill, calm, and control, not aggression and cruelty. She took a moment to gather herself, sitting on the poolside bench with her towel wrapped around her. The sun had begun to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the water. The bullies had moved to the far side of the pool, avoiding eye contact, whispering among themselves in low voices. They were subdued, their previous aggression replaced with reflection and perhaps shame. It was clear to everyone present that the confrontation had ended, not with chaos, but with a quiet but undeniable assertion of strength. Some children, inspired by what they had seen, began approaching the girl cautiously, curious and respectful. "How did you do that?" one whispered, eyes wide. She smiled gently, shrugging. "Just stay calm and focus," she said softly. "That's all." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. She had demonstrated more than physical skill. She had shown the power of composure, observation, and patience. The lesson went beyond martial arts. It was about standing strong in the face of intimidation, trusting oneself and responding with intention rather than anger. The bullies, sensing the shift in attention and the growing admiration toward the girl, began to leave the pool area quietly. Their social dominance had been challenged, their assumptions about power dismantled. As they walked away, some glances flicked toward her, filled with confusion and the first hints of respect they had never expected to feel. For the girl, it was a moment of quiet vindication. She had endured their cruelty, demonstrated her strength, and emerged unshaken. The rest of the pool gradually returned to normal. Children resumed playing, laughter once again filled the air, and parents began relaxing in their chairs. The incident, while intense, had already transformed the atmosphere. Where there had been tension, there was now a sense of admiration, curiosity, and reflection. The girl, still seated on the bench, observed quietly, her body finally relaxing after the exertion. She knew that the day had been a turning point, not just for herself but for everyone present. Her thoughts drifted briefly to the future. She understood that the bullies might try to challenge her again, but she also knew that the lesson had been delivered in a way that would leave a lasting impact. They had been shown that aggression and intimidation would not guarantee compliance, that skill, composure, and awareness could easily turn the tables. More importantly, she had proven to herself that she could face danger, respond effectively, and maintain control in moments of high tension. The girl's parents gathered her things, offering gentle smiles and quiet praise. "You handled that very well," her mother said. "I'm proud of you, not just for what you did, but for how you stayed calm." Her father nodded, his voice steady. "You've always been strong. Today everyone else saw it too." She nodded, feeling a quiet satisfaction. It wasn't about boasting or showing off. It was about acknowledgement and the realization that her abilities had meaning and value, not just in training rooms or private practice, but in real life, when it mattered most. As they left the pool area, she glanced back at the water. The sun was beginning to set, casting golden reflections across the surface. The bullies were long gone, their presence fading into memory, but the lessons of the afternoon lingered. She had faced fear, confrontation, and aggression head-on, and she had emerged with confidence intact. The pool, once a place of tension, had become a symbol of her strength, resilience, and ability to protect herself and stand firm. Even as the day ended, she knew that what had happened was not just an isolated incident. It was a defining moment, a demonstration of the power of focus, prep,